suppose, first of all, acknowledge BeLonG to the organisation I work for is 10 years old. And I suppose what I'd really like to do, I think it would be advantageous to talk to you about some of the learnings around social inclusion and LGBTQ people that we've learned and some of the mistakes we've learned over that time. And given the time constraint of today, unfortunately, I've boiled it down to 3 main points, but hopefully you'll find some use in these 3 main points. But to begin, I suppose I want to wish you all a happy LGBT Pride. It's Pride Week in Dublin, so it's kind of crazy at the moment, and there's events happening all the time, and it culminates in the big parade on Saturday. So if you're around Dublin City Centre on Saturday, I invite people to come along and see BeLonG's participation. We're usually about the biggest contingent in it, and I have to say, it sounds cliched, but to get the opportunity to march in a gay pride parade with a group of maybe 100 young people, for many of whom it's their first ever pride, I mean, it's just exhausting but exhilarating. So I welcome you and invite you all to join us on Saturday for that. I suppose today, talking about social inclusion, and it's really apt that this is happening for us in terms of LGBT Pride Week, because Pride, I suppose, in itself is a kind of an exercise in social inclusion, or else, I suppose, demanding social inclusion. But it's interesting for me, I actually completed a Master's in Sexuality Studies last year, and one of the modules that I undertook was on social inclusion. And in preparing for today, I kind of went back over my notes to see what would be useful from that, and to be honest, there's very little that is useful from it. And I think it goes back to Leanne's point that so much of what I've actually learned working with LGBT communities has been that it's not that complicated, social inclusion, and it's actually really achievable, and I think it's really important to demystify some of the processes about how we go about including marginalised groups. That's no offence to my lecturers, if any of them are here. It was a great course. So I suppose, to say from the onset, BeLonG to, by its nature, we work with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender young people in Ireland. And the research would show that, research from 3 or 4 years ago would show that on average, the 12 is the most common age from which people begin to self-identify as LGBT in Ireland, and 17 is the most common age in which they begin the process of coming out to others. So we work with 14 to 24-year-olds, but essentially it's that vulnerability that can occur between identifying as gay and telling somebody else between 12 and 17 that we're particularly concerned with. Also, we know from research that there are significant problems and barriers to LGBT people's participation, and there are societal barriers, whether they be environments such as education. So a lot of our services and a lot of our work would go around combating the exclusion of LGBT people across education sectors as well. I suppose for us, again, some of the learning has been around enhancing partnership and the learning that we get from LGBT young people, because I suppose in a sense you can equate LGBT young people in Ireland almost as the first generation of young people who've grown up with a confident self-identity as gay as soon as 14 or 15. That just wasn't possible in Ireland. Actually, this next Tuesday, I think, marks the 20th anniversary of the criminalisation of homosexuality in Ireland. So in 20 years, we've come such a huge way, and it's important to say that. But to get into the kind of the 3 points I want to share with you today, I suppose for many people here, and I see people from Carroll I know here, and I see people from different groups around the country who are involved in already supporting LGBT young people, but many people will be aware that one of the tools we've used to partner with Youth Work Ireland and BeLonG to is a starter pack accreditation scheme. So essentially we use a starter pack model where we establish a local steering committee, train them up in LGBT issues, and they begin in partnership with a local youth service to prioritise and promote LGBT youth. For us, there's an accreditation part of it which ensures that the work is kind of quality and appropriate and includes partnership with LGBT people. And I suppose the basis of that accreditation scheme is based on an ethos of kind of social justice, equality, and participation. Again, all of the things which we find are important to social inclusion. But rather than talk about that, because this is available on our website, you can download it, or I can talk to people at the break or over lunch about it. Again, so what I really like to concentrate on are the 3 points that I kind of feel are important to get across. So the first one is, I suppose, a really kind of a complex one, but I really believe that in order to understand or in order to have a sense of social inclusion, we have to kind of start by looking at social exclusion, because that's the basis of what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to fight against. And I suppose it's interesting, in terms of social inclusion as a concept, in more recent years, it's kind of widened beyond that original definition of a kind of a poverty-based exclusion to look at a whole range of societal exclusions as well. And I suppose for us, in BeLonG, the key to our success has been establishing a real evidence base of how that social exclusion looks for young people. So again, I talked to you about the research which shows that young people self-identify as 12, young people come out at 17. That has been a tremendous lever for BeLonG. It's motivated us to do the work. It's allowed us to create programs which are reflective of that very specific target audience and the isolation they often feel. And very bluntly, it's also, I think, opened the door for funding for us, having credible evidence base to show that LGBT people are excluded across different strategies of society. So I suppose, again, talking about documents such as Supporting LGBT Lives, Proud Voices, which was worked on at the University of Limerick in association with Limerick Youth Services. All of these reports and research are available on the BeLonG website, and I think they're really useful tools. It's really obvious to say, but it really makes sense. If we don't really understand the ways in which people are excluded, I don't think we can begin to build strategies to include them into the future. So that's number one. I suppose the second one, and of course I'm aware that research and conditioning research in our busy lives, it's all very complex, and it's a lot of work and involves money and all of that, but really I suppose that evidence is there and has been a big part of our learning and our learning around LGBT young people. The second one is one that's really close to home to me, and I mentioned this to a few people this morning. It's kind of an old school one. It's language. A really obvious one, in ways a really simple one, but then in other ways quite a complex one. And the reason why I say it's really pertinent today was, before I came here this morning, I was around at the corner of Parnell Street, and my husband works in an office on Parnell Street. And as I was leaving him, he gave me a kiss on the cheek, and I turned the corner onto Dominic Street, and I was walking up Dominic Street, and I heard two guys behind me, and they were singing George Michael's Outside. And they were going, let's go outside. And I was thinking, is that to me? They're saying this. And then Outside deteriorated into you queer, you faggot, and all of that kind of stuff. And it was really interesting coming up here, because I did have that kind of sense of, that doesn't happen to me often, thankfully, but I did have that kind of sense of how far up the street is Youth Work Ireland, and I kind of say these two guys are behind me, as well as I say when I got in here, I wanted to like stick my tongue out and call them all kinds of names. But that really reminded me of something I wanted to talk about in terms of language already, anyway, which was because recently at a social inclusion conference in the West of Dublin, which was launching the Charter on Social Inclusion, one of the questions I was asked was around the use of the word "that's so gay," or the phrase "that's so gay," and its prevalence amongst young people. And a frontline worker kind of said to me, realistically, if I had to challenge every time a young person used that phrase, "that's so gay," as a put down, or faggot, or queer, or any of these words, I'd never get any work done. And I suppose I used to demonstrate a level of flexibility around that, and I'm afraid my tolerance is absolutely gone for it. And I suppose I really wanted to impart that today. It's not about policing language, because we know that it's so complex, the whole area of language, but I think there's a basic decency that can be called on, and that basic decency is around addressing people about how they want to be addressed. So I would say to you, I'd put it to you that it's absolutely no coincidence that "that's so gay" is equated as a term to mean something that's not cool or something that's crap amongst young people now. There's no coincidence that that word has been chosen. Language, again, it's really complex, but we do know through research that repeated exposure to negative phrasing results in its implicit meaning being taken on. So it's like that old cliched adage of, if you tell a young person for long enough you're old, a young person begins to act old. So language is something very simple, also very complex, but something I would really say it's time that we have no tolerance for in terms of language that's socially excluding young people. The third one, and I suppose I'd say the biggest one in terms of our learning around supporting the development of LGBT youth services, in mainstream services, which I firmly believe are a brilliant place to have LGBT services, and particularly in relevance to this point, which is that addressing those cross sections of identity for LGBT young people and young people are, I think, really, really crucial in developing really appropriate socially inclusive practices. So what I mean by that is, I suppose, if I'm a traveller and if I'm a young gay man, how do those two identities merge? Do those two identities affect each other? Do they put pressure on each other? Do I have to choose one of those identities over the other? And how does religion, or class, or ability, or disability affect my sexual orientation and my gender identity? I suppose in BeLonG, we have found that our programmes that have reached out to young people at those often complex cross-cultural intersections, so the homeless gay drug user or the young lesbian Muslim, it's that work which has really, really enriched our understanding of social exclusion and allowed us to develop practices that I think, or I hope, are constantly forging, because I don't think it's a piece of work that's ever over, but it certainly forges and gives us the motivation towards socially inclusive practice. For us, if we don't address anti-traveller prejudice or racism or sexism, those issues are as fundamental to us as homophobia and transphobia, which is what we're known for. But I really don't believe one can be addressed without the other. And that's me. Thank you very much.